Yep. Here you go. What better way to start your Monday than some locker room talk? So this is what we got. Top five best individual seasons statistically over the 3 years of the ELF.
We doing everything they talk about. You know I'm everything a boss about. Not putting work and gotta toss them out. I'm really biting, they just barking out. I'm really riding, they just parking now. Hit street, what to talk about. See the big H when I'm walking out. Yeah.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Base Coverage. I'm your host, Jamal Clay. Thank you all for tuning in. Per usual, we'll go through this quick. Subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment. You definitely don't want to get involved in this topic because it's definitely about to stir up some debate. This is a special edition of Base Coverage. Whenever I bring this guy on, I like to call this one, the Scout's Eye edition of Base Coverage. So I'm bringing in my guy, Matt Breslington, to come in and join the party as we're about to go through his list, my list, debate, and talk about some great all-time performances in the ELF. So, Matt, what's going on, brother? How you doing?
What's up, man? I'm doing good. How are you?
Good, man. Can't complain per usual. So, I was thinking about this topic, and I was like, "Dang, what are some of the top all-time performances in the ELF over the 3 seasons?" Obviously, it's a short window, but there's been some great ones. And I was like, "All right, let's start at top 10." I'm like, "No, top 10 would be too easy. I feel like it's the easy way out. Let's go top 5 because there's gonna be some good guys left out." And I'm curious, what your thoughts were in terms of when you started creating this list. And, was it easy for you to do? Was it hard for you to do? What were your thoughts when you were performing your top 5?
Yeah, I mean, we went through five. And I've noted down some names who I thought might be worth looking into. And then my list was about 30 long, kept going, just more and more and more. And I was, oh yeah, what about this and what about that? And then I had to make some difficult decisions, leave some people out, put some people in. Everyone's going to be annoyed at me for it, but you know, it kind of has to happen. Some people have to make a cut. So the problem with doing top fives, man, is that only 5 people can effectively make the actual list. So
Yeah, and listen, even doing the list, I think for 3 spots I had like 12 guys. I'm like, well, obviously the math ain't mathing because some of these guys are gonna get left out. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna dive into Matt. We're gonna dive into your list. I'll give my list. All right, and then for everybody that's watching, definitely drop a comment. Let us know whose list you like. Who would you rather see in your top 5? Because this is definitely a conversation that's going to stir up some. So, Matt, let's go over your top 5. But before we do that, give me 2 guys that were honorable mention, just missed out on the top 5.
I mean, we got some honorable mentions. We got it's gonna be a tough one again. We got Carl Kitchens coming in at 2022 season, incredible. He had 16 sacks, which is a record. He had an interception, he had 4 breakups, 4 forced fumbles, a touchdown, and 33 and a half tackles for loss, which is incredible when you really think about how many that is. Another honorable mention, we got 2022 Alessandro Fernandez. He got 15 and a half sacks, 7 forced fumbles, which is a record, still is. A pick six, 21 and a half tackles for loss. And this is where I'm going to stir up a bit of controversy. I got Marcelo Beard as an honorable mention.
Wow.
Yeah, his 2023 individual season, he had 8 interceptions, 2 of those being pick sixes. He had a block kick, and he was, of course, the first European to win the Defensive Player of the Year options. But he does not make my top 5 seasonal players.
As hard as it is to play defensive back football with all the rules catering to the offense, Beard doesn't crack the top 5.
He doesn't.
Interesting.
Top 5. I can give you some reasons why, though, if you want. So the Guards had a really, really bad passing defense. They had, I think, last or second last passing defense. And then you would argue that wasn't his fault, but then you also had Ken Hike next to him, who was, in my opinion, a very elite corner. Obviously, you watched off guard football this year. I think Ken Hike's the truth. He just got re-signed. One of the first players in that franchise to get re-signed this season.
Shout out to my guards.
Exactly. And obviously, Beard's gone to France, which is a great pickup. But, they had a bad season. They weren't a great team. And he was kind of a bright spark on a bad team. But for me, doesn't make the all-time list of 5 best seasons, personally.
All right, Matt. Well, let's crack that top 5 then. Start from 5, work your way up, and let's talk about it.
All right, number 5, 2022, Kyle Sweet, the first ever Triple Crown winner. 1,561 yards, 17 touchdowns, along with 80. He was just a guy that could be everywhere. And this was him and Ford, which we'll get to in a second. I went back and forth for 2 days just going, this is it. So I've been through the ringer, but we've settled at Sweet at 5. He had 115 catches on 70 targets, which 170 targets, which is just a tad over 67.5% catch rate. And then he had a low of 33 yards, and he had no touchdowns in that game. That was in the playoffs against Vienna. But his low in the regular season was 75 yards. That was his worst game against the Ryan Fire. He had 2 games without a touchdown all season. 9 of his 13 games went over 120 yards, a high of 215, but suffered that first round exit. But the first ever Triple Crown winner for me is 5th on the all-time seasons. Wait, what's your thoughts? What are you saying?
This is gonna be a strong list. I'm sorry I had
Yeah,
this up on mute.
that's number 5. We got the Triple Crown winner. So number 4 coming in, Markel Castle, the recent Triple Crown winner. Now,
Back to
I
back.
have so I have a big bias when it comes to recency because the as we said last season, the quality of the league has just gone up and up and up and up and up, and that includes DBs. So Markel to put up extremely similar numbers to Carl Sweet and eclipse him in some ways. He had less catches and did equally the same production, about percent high on catch rate, so it wasn't really much there. He had the single season record of 242, which was his. He also tied the single season touchdown record against your guards, which is I know is a tough one, but his season low
We don't have to bring that up. We don't have to
his
bring
season low was against the guards too, though.
that.
His season low was against the guards, only 40 yards against him the second time around. 9 games of over 110 yards, 3 games that a touchdown was Barcelona and the Surge twice. Quite interestingly, the Surge he never eclipsed 100 yards on them, and then he missed the playoffs. But he is, it's a phenomenal receiver, best receiving season we've seen in European league football season. But phenomenal player, deep threat is crazy, great hands, diverse route tree. He's going to be going to Frankfurt this season, which I think is going to like blow up the league. Yeah, he comes in number 4. Now, number 3, we got Devin Burrell, this special team genius himself. Now, the reason he is above the 2 previous receivers, and he was, again, one of those players that's kind of yo-yo in between the top 5. So, in my opinion, Castle and Sweet, what they did was outstanding. I don't want it to be twisted in any kind of way. They're both outstanding, but they both were very, very similar in their production. No one is near Burrell. Absolutely no one touched him. No one. So he had 295 kick returns yards in one game. he was the only player to hit 2 kick return touchdowns in the same game. He had 1,552 52 kick return yards, which is a record. He had 1,820 single season return yards, which is a record. He had 5 kick return touchdowns, which is a record. He had 2 punt return touchdowns, second most of all time. 7 in total, which is a record. He had 39.79 yards per return, and that's second behind Bua, who had 42. Bua had 5 returns, Burrell had 39 returns. So big difference there. 22.5 yards per punt return, which is a record. And then he also notched three interceptions at corner as well for his troubles. So, as far as creating turnovers as a corner, he catching a lot of stick for this as well. He isn't an elite level corner. He is a very, very good, and he's a turnover genius. But when it comes to his kick return, that's just unparalleled in this kind of production.
With the way returns are set up now, especially with ELF going XFL rules with their style of kicking in, to change the game from that, he single-handedly, won the Kings versus the Prague game earlier in the season when he returned that kick. I think it was week one.
Yeah, and he did it with 2 teams.
Yeah,
his first touch with Milan was a kick return touchdown.
Yeah, this guy's a game changer. Anytime the ball touches his hand, so I'm not surprised here.
Phenomenal player. He's done really, really well. And then he nearly got 2,000 yards just on his returns, which is incredible. Speaking of 2,000 yards, number 2, we have 2021 Madre London coming in number 2, 2,009 yards in 9 games, 7.5 pretty much yards per carry, 22 touchdowns on the ground, plus 1 receiving. My thing would be also top 5 rushing games in history. All Madre London with 352, 348, 320, 390, and 356. He also scored 4 touchdowns in 4 of those games. He went under 100 yards in 1 game that season, which was 85 yards against the eventual champions in the Galaxy. He was the first ever MVP we had. My cons and why he's not number one. He got the ball every single play. 44, 44 carries on the Kings, 39 on the Panthers, 35 on the Dragons.
Still
He's
couldn't
never
be
much.
stopped.
Yeah, no, they couldn't
Still
touch
couldn't
him.
be stopped.
7.5 yards of carries. Like obscene. It's incredible.
We'll love to see Madre. I don't think it'll happen, but we'll love to see Madre in the ELF now, just to see, you
That'll be
know,
interesting.
How he pans out. Obviously, more teams, longer season, stuff like that. But I mean, the crazy thing is, Madre wasn't even the starter beginning of the season. It was I forgot his name. Wait for the Ravens was in the CFL.
Yeah, I think that's why he's not number two. I can't even remember. I can't
Yeah,
remember his name off the top of my head, but I remember London because he was just that untouchable. I mean, 7.5 yards of carry is just you give him the ball, you're probably gonna get a first down.
yeah.
If not, second and three. Like, you know. Yeah, he was phenomenal. And 22 touchdowns on the ground and one in the air. He was never much receiving yet throughout. He had 71 yards on the receiving game, which surprised me when I look back at it. Yeah, incredible running back, probably the best running back we've ever seen. Glenn's obviously the leading rusher. He's definitely up there. As a David from Poland. So, it's competitive, but Madrid London did it in 9 games. He didn't even play the full season.
9 games.
Didn't even play the full season. And
yeah.
2,000 yards. Incredible. And number one, Jadrian Clark, number one.
Clark.
Second in pass completion, ELF history, 65.65. First in passing yards, first in average yards per pass, which is important because he's not just going for check downs and letting the receivers do all the work. He's the one pushing the agenda. He had 9.93 yards on each attempt. So nearly a first down every time he threw the ball. First in passing touchdowns. He was 23 touchdowns ahead of anyone else. Chad Jeffries, who was again spectacular that season, was second, still 23 below him. Only 7 interceptions on 361 attempts, 1.94%, which is a little bit higher than some of his contemporaries, but he's running a high-powered offense. He touched more than anyone else. Best QB rated of all time, MVP, champion, final MVP. Won every single thing he could get. Best offense of all time, 45 points a game. Broke the single-season passing touchdown record against Paris. And then when people were saying about Munich offense maybe being better, he went and dropped 7 touchdowns on them with only 13 completions and 19 attempts. So didn't really need much to get it done.
One of the most efficient seasons in Europe, not just ELF, in Europe. One of the most efficient seasons in Europe.
Absolutely. I mean, he had the second most yards in that Paris game while getting 8 touchdowns. He was only 1 yard off getting the most, which he also owns, coincidentally. And it was the same week as his touchdown record. Obviously, the big thing, shout out to his offensive line, were also incredible. 5 All-Stars. He had the best receiver with Anthony Mahoney from Europe. He had Kofi, Glenn. So he had a phenomenal supporting cast, and obviously he had Andrew OC, probably the best coordinator in the league. So he had a lot of supporting weapons, but you got to put it together. A lot of people say about this and that and great teams but he put it all together and he had the best season in ELF history, and I stand by it.
Hey, I can't argue that. He's definitely top 1, 2, however you want to put it. Doesn't even matter. But like I said, one of the most efficient seasons in the ELF.
Yeah, he was having fun. He was just throwing whatever he wanted, and it was just working.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. The type of season he had proved a lot of people wrong. Good for Jadrian.
Mm-hmm.
Yo, let me ask you this. Mm-hmm. No defense in there?
No defense in there.
No defense.
I mean, it's an offensive league. Like we haven't really had. Defense. But like Kyle Kitchens is phenomenal, and he probably could be in here. But last season he was getting triple teamed like every play. Like he was probably. That's why I think he probably should have won Defensive Player of the Year again. I'll probably get a stick for that. But I think the Kitchens was the best Defensive Player of the Year last year. I mean, he was getting triple teamed every play, and he was still got 15.5 sacks. Like he's excellent. But he hasn't reached that 20 mark. That's what I want to see. That'll be that's
like the next expectation for Kyle now.
Exactly. And Kyle has a lot of expectations because he's been a 2-time Defensive Player of the Year. Like he is the best pass rusher we have. Alessandro is right up there. He's going to be with Madrid this season as well. So it'll be interesting to see how he does. I think now that he has come second in Defensive Player of the Year, he's going to really try and ramp up, try and get first again. That's what I'm excited about. I think he could easily hit this season.
And we'll see if Berlin takes the next step. They're similar to like the Andrew Luck Colts in the sense that every year they've got one step further. So let's see this year coming up if Berlin could go one more step further, maybe host a playoff game or make it to the semis. But all right, I'll get my list now. Again, don't forget, comment below because this is definitely going to stir up some debate all day long. I'm gonna release this early Monday because this is gonna be an interesting one. So all right. I'll start with my top 5. But first, let me give you some honorable mentions. So 3 honorable mentions. And I'll tell you off the rip. I got some defensive players in my top 5. I gotta hold it down for my defense.
Okay.
All right. Honorable mention. 2022, AJ Wentland, 160 tackles, 82 solo, 13.5 TFL, 4 PBUs, 5 forced fumbles. The guy is out of control. I think a full season next year with the Panthers, we're going to see similar numbers, and we'll see what happens there. Another honorable mention, Kyle Sweet. Kyle Sweet didn't crack my top 5. Here's why.
Ouch. Okay.
I don't know if I could put 2 Triple Crown winners in my top 5 with similar numbers. Great seasons. Don't get me wrong, but I think some guys at other positions definitely had great seasons as well too. So, and it's like one guy made it to the playoffs. One guy had more yards average per catch. Outside of that, similar numbers, both on Triple Crown. So obviously, the other Markel is in the top 5, just where he lands. It depends where you see. But Kyle Kitchens just missed it. And then 23, this hurt because just like you, I was debating with this guy for a while. I wanted him in there, but I had to leave him just out, and that's Devon Bureau. The return. I know it's hard. It's hard because of he's on this list or in range of the list mostly because of what he does in the special teams games, which is great, and it's a lot, like so much respect to like what he does. He just missed it for me personally, and that was hard. That was one of the ones I debated, about a lot. But without further ado, let's crack into this top 5. All right, here we go. Number 5. Good old Masio Beard comes in at number 5. Hey, I gotta give respect to my DBs. We're talking about someone who got most of the attention and the targets away from Ken Hike Jr. and stepped up to the plate. Again, you listed a lot of the stats: 40 tackles, 8 interceptions, 2 to the crib, 12 PBUs. When he was picked upon, he stepped up and he performed, and good for him. And again, there's always lower expectations, whether we want to admit it or not, for American imports and Euro imports. And he definitely, played some of the best ball in all of Europe, regardless of what your status is. So shout out to Melso Beer, cracking number 5 on my list. Number 4, 2023, Markel Castle. Again, 97 catches, 1,560 or 80 yards, 17 touchdowns, average 16 yards per catch. This guy was a dog. I think we're going to see similar numbers with Frankfurt, but I'm a little hesitant for a number of reasons. I want to see who Frankfurt puts around him, and he's also in a much tougher conference in terms of teams, their reputation, what they've been doing so far this offseason. Obviously, Paris is off to a good start. Hamburg looking to bounce back. We'll see what happens there. The fire. But we'll see. I'm not going to write him off yet, but I think the reunion is definitely going to be an exciting story, especially heading into week 1. Excuse me. Number 3, I'm going back to the defensive side. 2022 Kyle Kitchens, probably his best year in the ELF thus far. Obviously, we talked about it. He was the primary focus this past season, but 58 tackles, 16 sacks. But with those sacks, they accumulated for 122 yards. Out of 58 tackles, 33.5 were tackle for losses. On top of that, 4 forced fumbles, 1 fumble recovery, and 1 to the crib. So I think cumulative, he put together a great season. Obviously, won Defensive Player of the Year. So I have to give him a shout out. Number 2, 2023, Jadrian Clark. 2023, Jadrian Clark. And the reason why, he had, again, one of the most efficient seasons in the ELF, obviously, respectively. We know the numbers. What I would argue is the difference between him and my number 1 is, his touchdown to interception ratio was great. When it comes to passing yards, there's about 4 or 5 other people that put up close to 3,000 passing yards that season. and it's just the nature of the game. It's a passing game now. Obviously he capped it with, MVP, number one voted on multiple different, pages for best player in the league, and he deserves that. But for me personally, number one is going to Madre London, someone who we're talking about a position that, regardless where the sport's being played, really gets no love. It doesn't get no love in America. It doesn't get no love in Canada. It doesn't get no love in Europe, right? The running back position is the middle child, when it comes to a football roster. No one really cares that much about the running back position. There's no workhorses like that anymore. There's guys that split time, split carries, and for someone like Madre London in 9 games to have 2,009 yards and 22 touchdowns, their primary focus wasn't even the starter for the Cologne Centurions. The Cologne Centurions haven't been right since year one, haven't made the playoffs. Offense hasn't even been nearly the same. Actually, year 2, they were pretty explosive, from a passing perspective, but after that Barcelona game, they just dipped. But Madre London cracks my number one for all-time best individual seasons in the ELF. And with that, you say what?
I say 5-5 record and they make number one. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're talking about individual.
Yeah. But
individual.
But Jadrian carried the team was phenomenal, but like undefeated, first ever undefeated season in ELF history, went all full season. No one even went near them. Like I think Paris were probably the closest team to them, and they went was it 21 down? I think in the second game, not the first game. He put 8 on them and 500 yards. But I mean, I like the list. I think it makes a lot of sense. Obviously, we kind of we had the same guys, but just in a couple different order. But I think I'm also a former DB, so maybe I'm a little bit too harsh on DBs, but Beard comes in probably the best zonal corner, probably just in general. Like regardless, I can't really think of many people kind of come near him in terms of his zone coverage. So he's phenomenal. I expect him to be another big player this year with Paris.
And he'll definitely get work going up against Anthony in practice too. So
yeah. See, that's what. Yeah. So they've got those two, and then they got the Fire. Obviously in the same conference. I'm not sure who they've. We don't know if they've signed Amara Williams back yet, but he's obviously was a pick 6 leader last year.
Yeah.
So we got one of the best DBs coming against one of the other best DBs. We got that conference is probably going to be the best, and Jadrian gets a chance to even top maybe last season's stats. So
most definitely. Well, as I mentioned before, comment below because this is gonna start some conversation. I'm already telling Matt to charge his phone so we could debate this all day. All day Monday.
Absolutely.
That's our list. That's Matt's list. That's my list. I'll post the list on the screen. I just want to give a quick shout out to some guys that just missed it, or some guys that I was considering. Mm-hmm. All right. And then if you have 1 or 2 guys, you throw them in there too, Matt. But 2022, Zach Blair, right? 127 tackles, 25 tackle for losses, 3 PBUs, 2 forced fumbles, 1 fumble recovery. This guy is the heartbeat of any defense he plays on, and that was an Istanbul Rams team that. You can read between the lines. All right.
Yeah.
2022, Magic Zach, magical season. Obviously, him and Kyle Sweet. That Barcelona team that year was a fun team to watch. Just the chemistry they had. Obviously the season he had. Only thing that bothers me about Zach's game, man, he takes a lot of sacks, man. He takes a lot of sacks. So that's the only thing that bothered me about like Zach's overall game, but he's trying to make a play, so I can't knock him too much. Yeah. Other guys, obviously Chad Jeffries balled out last year, 2023. Orange Zach, 2022, Russell Panthers, 88 tackles, 3.5 sacks, 6 interceptions, 2 to the crib, 8 PBUs, 3 forced fumbles. I mean, guys everywhere. Just parted ways with the Surge. There's rumors going around. I won't dive into it because, again, I'm not here to report stuff. I just react. And anybody who tells me stuff, I keep that close to the vest. So, yeah, I mean, you could talk 2022 Glenn.
Yeah, I was about to mention.
Yeah, running back. So some guys that just missed out. You got any guys you can think of?
I mean, Glenn got, just over 1,400 yards and 21 touchdowns. In my opinion, probably should have been MVP. Obviously, Sean Shelton won it, another player who could be on the list. But I think the big thing that kept Glenn off of that list was the fumbles. He fumbled 6 times, lost 4 of them. So, he didn't necessarily, he actually really, really fixed that this year. He was a lot better than last season. Obviously, last year, Sean Shelton, the MVP, 31 touchdowns, 6 picks. He was really like low key underrated. I think we kind of see that with a lot of
Yeah, he was.
the Raiders guys. Yeah, just kind of like
I'm
underrated
not gonna say
guys.
I hated it, but I thought Zach or Glenn
Mm,
deserved MVP. But when I look into Sean, his numbers when he played his best ball, I'm like, you could make an
he
argument.
was efficient,
Yeah,
but
I can't knock him.
he's Glenn. I wanted Glenn, British guy. I wanted him to take it home to the UK, but yeah, he was just. I probably would probably like maybe in the top 10. I would have probably had Glenn's season last year. It's just those fumbles that kept him out of it, which obviously is a very important thing for a running back to have.
Most definitely. And not to mention, when we talk about running backs, the closest one 2021, 2022 to Madre or Glenn was Jock Crawford. Yeah. I think he just cracked 1,000, those years.
Twice.
But even to put this into perspective, last year Glenn missed what? 5-6 games?
5 games, yeah.
Almost still had 1,000 yards.
Yeah.
I need Glenn and Madre in the same season.
Oh,
somebody call Madre London right now because I need Glenn and Madre in the same season to hash this out right now. That's what I need.
I'm not sure about American running back.
Yeah, no.
American running backs.
Hey, we got one in Italy. We'll see how Patrick Carr performs in Italy. So we're not dead yet. But
we got Roquelaw obviously signed a Russian American. That's caused some controversy.
He's EU now. He's an EU now.
He is EU. He is EU. But he was A in the first and EU in the third. It's kind of like, where's the consistency?
I tell you what, if they bring Brzezowski back, you already know the formula.
That's confusing. Like,
well, they're going with a two-headed monster, and they're going to try to run the ball down your neck.
Yeah, but David was good enough to be a number one back. I'm surprised. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think he's a really, really good running back that they brought in, but I'm running with David on this one. I think that he could be. He's
younger too, I think.
Yeah, like he's like 23. Like he's got a lot of gas still left in that tank. So unless he's off elsewhere, that might be an interesting thing.
I hear there's some good chocolate in the Alps. So,
I'm not so sure about that one, but still, we'll see how that goes.
We'll see. But Matt, hey, appreciate you coming on, man. Thank you guys for tuning in. Again, subscribe to the channel and drop a comment because the fingers are going to be active today on Monday when we talk about this, and I'm ready to chop it up with a lot of you guys. So thank you guys for tuning in. Subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment. Matt Brezington, aka the Scouts Eye edition of base coverage. All right.
Thank you very much for having me again.
Yeah, most definitely. We'll do it again soon, brother.